from an over-the-shoulder shot or behind-the-back perspective. Thus, the third-person perspective allows the game designer to create a more strongly characterized avatar and directs the player's attention, as if watching a film. In contrast, a first-person perspective provides the player with greater immersion into the game universe. Please keep this in mind. The difference in perspective also has an impact on gameplay. The third-person shooters allow players to see the area surrounding the avatar more clearly. This viewpoint facilitates more interaction between the character and their surrounding environment, such as the use of tactical cover in Gears of War, or navigating tight quarters. As such, the third-person perspective is better for interacting with objects in the game world, such as jumping on platforms, engaging in close combat, or driving a vehicle. However, the third-person perspective can interfere with tasks that require fine aiming. Let me repeat, the third-person perspective can interfere with tasks that require fine aiming. Hence, the details get fuzzy, the truth gets fuzzy. Do you understand, dear slaves? Your world, the video game called Mother Earth, operating in third-person mode, is getting fuzzy, and the fine aiming has been left behind generations and generations long ago. The truth has been warped. Third-person shooters sometimes compensate for the distinct perspective by designing larger, more spacious environments than first-person shooters. Hence, the personas need to keep expanding the field of play in order to compensate for the lack of the truth in their act to avoid being caught. Do you understand? Now let's briefly mention the fourth person, rarely discussed by the fictions of this world. The fourth person, the one, discussed in Finnish and related languages. As for Wikipedia, the term fourth person is also sometimes used for the category of indefinite or generic reference. The words work like one. In English, phrases such as the one should be prepared, or people say that when the grammar treats them differently from ordinary third-person forms, the so-called zero person. In Finnish and related languages, in addition to passive voice, may serve to leave the subject referent open. Zero-person subject sometimes translated as one, but the problem with that is that the English language constructions involving one, such as one hopes that will not happen, are rare and could be considered to be expressing an overly academic tone, while Finnish statements like "iässäi koskete," one cannot touch, or oh cannot touch, are recognizable to and even used by young children. Hence, in the fourth person, you dissociate from the first and second person, but are still connected to the third person, as you are still a person, a persona. This mode is restricted to so-called gurus or spiritual leaders or prophets. They are still fictional personas operating in the fourth person, controlled by the third person. So let's begin now to discuss the word terrorism and its relation to persona, to person, to Homo sapiens. As per Wikipedia, terrorism is the systematic use of terror, especially as a means of coercion, in the international community. However, terrorism has no universally agreed legally binding criminal law definition. Common definitions of terrorism refer only to those violent acts which are intended to create fear, are perpetuated for a religious, political, ideological goal, and deliberately target or disregard the safety of non-combatants. Some definitions now include acts of unlawful violence and war. The use of similar tactics by criminal organizations for protection rackets or to enforce a code of silence is usually not labeled terrorism, though these same actions may be labeled terrorism when done by a politically motivated group. Terrorism comes from the word terrorism and originally referred specifically to state terrorism. It's a French word, as practiced by the French government during the Reign of Terror. The French word terrorisme is in turn derives from the Latin verb terreo, meaning I frighten. Terrorism means I frighten. The person, the fictional Homo sapien, the first, second, third person, is created by frightening the Homo sapien. The Homo sapien created the personas, the first, the second, and third persons, to control himself, to control his ego and his id. The Homo sapien creates these personas by frightening himself, frightening the Homo sapien children, and frightening the Homo sapien babies during religious or traditional rituals passed generation to generation. This process results in the creation of personas. This process has been developed at home by the secret societies, royalty, the popes, your military, and perpetuated by your leaders, resulting in the creation of a video game called Mother Earth. Hence, in synopsis, you, the Homo sapien persona, is a terrorist. You are engaged in terrorism. You are guilty of all the things I mentioned in my Umbrella Walk video, Guilt of the Homo sapiens, released on March 12, 2012. And I add to that, you are also guilty of terrorism. As per Wikipedia, Bruce Hoffman, a well-known scholar, has noted that it's possible to identify some key characteristics of terrorism. He proposes that by distinguishing terrorists from other types of criminals, terrorism from other forms of crime, we come to appreciate that terrorism is ineluctably political in aims and motives, violent or equally important, threatens violence, designed to have far-reaching psychological repercussions beyond the immediate victim or target, conducted by an organization with an identifiable chain of command or conspiratorial cell structure, whose members wear no uniform or identifying insignia, and perpetuated by a subnational group or non-state entity, perpetrated by this subnational group or non-state entity. In November 2004, a United Nations Secretary General report described terrorism as any act intended to cause death or serious bodily harm to civilians or non-combatants with the purpose of intimidating a population or compelling a government or an international organization to do or abstain from doing any act. As per dictionaryreference.com, a terrorist, as a noun, it's a person usually a member of a group who uses or advocates terrorism. It's a person who terrorizes or frightens others. The Homo sapien animal in its form as a persona acting in the video game called Mother Earth, is guilty of using terrorism by the use of the third person, the second person, the first person, and also with the fourth person, guilty of torturing children and committing acts of terrorism. The legal profession is guilty of perpetuating the use of the persona by creating a legal system that further binds the persona, the person, the fiction, by creating more bars for the prison walls and prison called Mother Earth. The Homo sapien is guilty. The legal profession is guilty. Let's look at the USA Patriot Act, Title 8. As per Wikipedia, it's termed Strengthening the Criminal Laws Against Terrorism is the 8th of 10 titles which comprise the U.S. Patriot Act, an anti-terrorism bill passed in the United States 1 month after September 11, 2011 attacks. Title 8 contains 17 sections and creates definitions of terrorism and establishes or redefines rules with which to deal with it. Penalties. A number of penalties for terrorism offenses were defined or amended by Title 8. Section 809 removed the statute of limitations on prosecution for any terrorist offense that led to the death or injury of any person, while Section 810 increased the maximum penalty for destroying an energy facility, providing material support to terrorists or terrorist organizations, destroying national defense materials, sabotaging nuclear facilities or fuel, or the damage or destruction of an interstate gas or hazardous liquid pipeline facility from not more than 20 years imprisonment to any prison term. Conspiracy provisions were added by Section 811 to criminal statutes that cover arson within the special maritime and territorial jurisdiction of the United States, killings in federal facilities, the destruction of the communications line, stations, or system, the destruction of property within the special maritime and territorial jurisdiction of the United States, wrecking trains, material support to terrorists, torture, the sabotage of nuclear facilities or fuel, interfering with flight crews, the carrying on of weapons or explosives on an aircraft, and the destruction of interstate gas or hazardous liquid pipeline facility. Furthermore, Section 812 of the Patriot Act specifies that there is to be post-release supervision of terrorists for the rest of their lives if they committed a terrorist act that resulted in or created a foreseeable risk of death or serious bodily injury to another person. The September 11, 2001 attack was a terrorist attack by the Homo sapien personas, the third, the second, the first and fourth persons of the world, including Canadians and Americans and every guilty fiction worldwide. Do you really understand what I'm saying? Do you really understand what I am saying, dear slaves? You, the Homo sapien fictions, attacked yourself on September 11, 2001, because it is what you do. It is the thing that you do. It is all you do. You are insane. You, the fictional persona Homo sapien, cannot be permitted to lead yourselves. Understand these words, dear slaves. You are insane. You, the fictional persona Homo sapien, cannot be permitted to lead yourselves. Definitions Title 8 defines a number of terms. The terms domestic terrorism is already defined under 18 U.S.C. 2331, and this was amended by Section 802 of the Patriot Act to include mass destruction as well as assassination or kidnapping as a terrorist activity. The definition encompasses activities that are dangerous to human life, that are a violation of the criminal laws of the United States or of any state, and are intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, influence the policy of a government by intimidation or coercion, or are undertaken to affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping while in the jurisdiction of the United States. When investigating international terrorism, the Attorney General can investigate the willful production of defective national defense material, national defense premises, or national defense utilities. The Attorney General can investigate the destruction or interference of a submarine mine, torpedo, fortification, or harbor defense system, or violates any presidential executive order governing persons or vessels within the limits of defensive sea areas. An assault on the President of the United States, the President-elect, the Vice President, or the next in line. An assault on the United States member of Congress or a member of Congress. The destruction of energy facility, a raid or predatory attack of any U.S. property. The conspiracy to damage or destroy specific property situated with a foreign country belonging to a foreign government with which the U.S. is at peace. Let me repeat, the conspiracy to damage or destroy specific property situated within a foreign country belonging to a foreign government with which the U.S. is at peace. Dear slaves, understand the words. The destruction of any building, vehicle, or other personal or real property that is leased or owned by the U.S. government through the use of fire or an explosive. Threats made to kill or injure another person. A further amendment made the following activities part of the definition of international terrorism: the destruction of an aircraft or aircraft facilities, violence at international airports, arson within specific maritime territorial jurisdictions, use of biological weapons, use of the viral virus, use of the chemical weapons, the kidnapping or assassination of a congressional cabinet and Supreme Court members, the use of nuclear materials in a terrorist attack, participation in nuclear and weapons of mass destruction threats to the U.S., the use of plastic explosives, the arson and bombing of government property risking or causing deaths, the arson and bombing of property used in interstate commerce, the killing or attempted killing during an attack on a federal facility with a dangerous weapon, the conspiracy to murder, kidnap, or maim persons abroad, unauthorized access to protected computers, the killing or attempted killing of officers and employees of the U.S., the murder or manslaughter of foreign officials, official guests, or internationally protected persons, hostage taking, the depredation of government property or contracts, the destruction of communication line stations or systems, injury to buildings or property within special maritime and territorial jurisdiction of the U.S.,